Let's start now. All right, let's get some volume. Hello, world. We are live on YouTube. We're going to be talking about the house systems used in astrology, the various kinds of house systems. And last week, we discussed the two kinds of zodiac systems. Let me try to get this set up. Last week, we talked about the various kinds of zodiac systems. The tropical and sidereal, and this was kind of a big hullabaloo that there's options to choose from. So this week I want to talk to you about houses and show you how there's options with houses and how crazy that is, how many there are, and how different it makes everything. So this will also help put into perspective the zodiac issue on how it's actually, even though it's quite a huge issue, it's not the whole shebang. Just because you choose one zodiac or the other doesn't mean that it's an entirely different thing. There's other things that make huge differences as well. All right. So let me see who are the early birds. Let's see. Well, Conscious Ocean is coming up with a something for my YouTube page. Facebook page. It's great that he doesn't know anybody who is scared of book learning and astrology. You probably haven't hung around too much. Listen carefully to conversations. They're always saying, this is just book theory, or you're too bookish. Let's not get too bookish. Let's do research and blah blah and all that kind of stuff. All right, you didn't miss anything, Bon Bon. We're just getting started. I just did the introduction. Ravi, sup? Darren, Sonia, thanks all 9. You ready to get started? We can talk about house systems. So, what I'll do is I'll give a little bit of an explanation of something, and then I'll see if you guys understand, if you have questions about it. Okay? And then probably we'll just leave the end for any kind of questions that come up. All right. So, Ravi, I hope you sleep good after this session. Johnny B, welcome. Bong Bong, she got a bad cold. You have to blame this little tiny planet that's called a germ. Sonia, you wanted to ask about Kritika Nakshatra, but today's about the houses. But I'll tell you what, why do we sometimes start as Kritika with the first nakshatra? Because that's the first nakshatra. It's actually only after the sidereal zodiac was adopted that Ashwini started to be counted as first. But in all the Vedas, Kritika is taken as first because Agni is always first. Fire is always lit first. Okay. Nope, we're going to just get started now. So first I want to explain to you what houses are. Okay? Before we talk about different house systems, what are houses? The word house is interesting, isn't it? It's like, what do you mean? I got different houses. I can go to my vacation house and come to this house. But other ways of describing the things besides house include bhava and topos in Greek and bhava in Sanskrit. With topos basically means a topic, and it's very similar to tropical. So a tropic is a turning point, a waypoint, a marker. And a topic is a marker around something that you discuss. So in the Greek astrological texts, they're called topics. They got 12 topics, 12 areas of life. In India, they're called bhavas, which means area beings. 12. The word is just from the root bu, which means be. So it just means these are 12 areas, 12 things, 12 sections of is. So 12 sections of life are the 12 bhavas. 12 topics of life are the 12 topos. Why are they called houses? Because house is just an area in which things happen. That's what it means. Sometimes they've been called 12 places. Some translations are 12 places, etc. Okay? So the first thing, what are the houses? The houses are areas that have some symbolic meaning. Simple so far, right? Anybody not understand so far what I've presented? Anybody want to say, I don't get it? The houses are just areas of something, of space, that have some symbolic connotation. Let me open up this window because it's going to get too hot. Okay, back. Okay, now you might have a question of, wait, I thought that the signs were areas of space. Why do I need more areas of space? I already got my areas. Right? What's the need for the signs? What's the need for the houses when I have the signs? The signs are 12 areas of space that have symbolic meaning. What do I need the houses for? 12 areas of space that have symbolic meaning, and how are they different? That's the big next question. So, the signs are areas dividing the ecliptic. The houses are areas dividing the horizon, or the Earth's space, the sky. The horizon-based space. Signs are divisions of the equinox-based space. So remember last session I talked about Bhuva, Swaha? That there's houses, signs, and nakshatras, stars. So the stars are divisions of stellar space. That's Swarga. The signs are divisions of ecliptical space, the sun's orbit, the area where the planets and the sun orbit. That's Bhuva. And then the houses are divisions of Bu, the Earth's space. So basically, is my mic like too loud? It's giving me like red clips. So basically, when you look up into space, you're going to have to look through the sky. So picture the whole thing as three spheres that are not welded together. They're separately rotating spheres. Swarga are the stars. That's the outermost sphere. It turns at its own pace. Then Bhuva, the signs, that's the middle sphere. It turns at its own pace. This is how the Puranas tell you to envision it, as three spheres like this. And then there's Bu, the earthly sphere, which is the houses, and that turns at its own space. Actually, it seems like it's not turning because you're standing on it. So it seems like because you're standing on this Bu, which is turning, the earthly sphere, then it seems like the other guys are not only moving at their own pace, but they're also spinning around super fast as they turn. But if you got off all three spheres, you would see that the inner one is also moving. All right? So the houses are divisions of earthly space. The signs are divisions of ecliptic space. The houses are divisions of horizontal space, the space that's based on the horizon. The signs are divisions of the equinotic space, the space that's based on the equinox of the sun. And the stars are divisions of outer space. Any questions so far about that? It's clear? This shirt is just a common grandpa's undershirt in Japan. And actually, literally, it's my grandfather's undershirt. But I love it, too, because it's very thin and it's really good in the summer. Diane Vowell says she loves it. All right, we're going to talk about house cusps. We're going to talk about 2nd and 12th house, all that stuff. Actually, watch my other videos to know what the houses are about. Today I'm talking about house systems. Okay, we'll talk about house cusps, though, because that's important. But so far, what I've said so far, I want you people to follow what I'm saying so you learn what I'm trying to say. So far, you follow what I'm saying? The houses are 12 areas of space that have each one of the areas has a different symbolism to it. What space are they dividing? They're dividing the horizontal space, the space that's based on the horizon, the space that you see in relation to east, west, north, and south. And whereas the signs are also divisions of space, they're divisions of the sun's path, the planetary space. And then the stars are also divisions of space, the nakshatras and so forth. But they're divisions of deep, deep space. Okay, is that clear? So these are like three spheres that turn at different rates. Okay, so what should we talk about Next, now the house systems. Okay? The house systems are, there's more than one house system. So that's the tricky thing. You got a lot. You have two zodiac systems, so you think, oh my god, which one is which? What am I going to choose? A sidereal zodiac or a tropical zodiac? But you have like 18 house systems or something that you can choose from. But they're basically in three groups. Let's put them in three groups. Okay. We could put them in two groups. Make it even simpler. You could say there's two groups of house systems. One of them is fixed and the other one is variable. So one of them is the houses will be a fixed size, and the other one is that the houses will be a variable size. So it means that not every house is going to be the same amount of degrees. That's what variable means. And it's not always going to be the same from one chart to the next. In Sanskrit, the variable chart is called a chalit. Chala means move. Right? So bhava chalit means that the houses are variable. They change. They're not fixed. So in Sanskrit, in traditional Indian astrology, you have these two choices between a fixed house system called a bhava system or a bhava chalit system, a dynamic system which is moving. Fernanda is asking, how do you choose one system or the other? Let's talk about that. It's not like these systems. This is important because this is the same thing as the tropical sidereal issue. It's not like you can pick and you should pick and choose one or the other or whatever suits your taste. You have to understand the history of how these things have developed and try to seek out what's the true root, the root of the truth of the thing. So what I try to present really strongly with the sidereal tropical thing is if you seek out the true root of the thing, even in the Indian tradition, you're going to find out that the signs are supposed to be based on the equinox, so they should be tropical. Now, let's try to do the same analysis on the house systems. If you look at it historically and logically and see how they developed, you won't really feel like you have to make a choice to choose one or the other. Okay? So, so there's a bhava chalit and there's a bhava, there's a fixed system, right? Fixed system means every house is going to be 30 degrees and it doesn't change. Now, there's all kinds of dynamic house systems, excuse me, and there's all kinds of fixed house systems also. So let's talk about the different kinds of fixed house systems, the different kinds of dynamic house systems, and I'll show you an example of the same chart divided into different houses. Okay? Divided by different house systems. The first and foremost house system of all throughout history, if you look at this historically and logically, the first and foremost house system is a fixed house system called the whole sign house system. It means that the house is defined by the sign. Right? The whole sign equals the house. So let me show you a picture of that. It's okay. Here you got an example of whole sign house systems. This is for a chart from 2014 in Sweden. We're going to use Sweden because it's very north, so it'll be very dramatic how you can see the difference between these things. I'll explain that in a second. So this is a whole sign system. You could see that the ascendant is in Cancer, and it's about 10 degrees Cancer, right? So since the ascendant is in Cancer, then Cancer equals the first house. The whole sign of Cancer is the first house. The whole sign of Leo is the second house. Second place, second topic. First place, first topic is the stuff that's in Cancer. The second place in the chart, the second topic is the stuff that's in Leo. The third is the stuff that's in Virgo. Right? So one sign equals one house. There's no intercepted houses. There's no houses with more than one sign. Okay? This is the oldest system. This is the first system of houses. This is why there's 12 houses. You can see why there's 12 signs. If you go back to the Q&A that we did last week, I explained, remember with that clock graphic and the hour hand moving as the orbit of the sun and the minute hand moving as the orbit of the moon, and you can see that the moon moves almost exactly 12 times faster than the sun. So the moon makes 12 orbits when the sun makes one. And so each one of the segments of the sun's path while the moon makes one orbit equals one of the signs. Remember that? So you can see why there's 12 zodiacs. Why are there 12 houses? There's nothing going on there with orbits or anything. It's just because the houses originally are conceived. The original seers, the original astrological system, conceived of the houses as the relationship of the signs to the horizon. This is what's called the horoscope. The very word horoscope, or lagna in Sanskrit, means the way of seeing the hour, or horoscope, the way to tell what hour it is. So it means the ascendant. And the sun's relation to the ascendant, to the eastern horizon, is how you can see what the hour is. Now, the whole horoscope is based on, we call the darn thing a horoscope, right? We call a birth chart a horoscope, or we call astrology in general horoscopes, because it's all based on everything's relationship to that point, that ascendant point. So the way that the houses were originally conceived, the actual conception of houses itself, is not areas of the sky, but how the 12 areas of middle space relate to the inner space. How the 12 areas of middle space, how the 12 signs relate to the earth by virtue of relating to the eastern horizon. So the definition of it is wherever the eastern horizon is, that's the first house. Whatever sign is on the eastern horizon, that sign is the first place. It's the first area of the chart. And the next sign is the next area. Is that clear? Got any questions about it? About whole sign houses? I don't understand, Sonia. Partitioned in 3 layers of atmosphere corresponding to a particular mansion of place, we get houses overlapping. House with sign. Can't understand that. If you can reiterate it in different words, I might be able to understand. Okay, so let's go on then. This is why I use whole sign houses. And guess what? Everybody used whole sign houses up until recent times. Up until recent times, meaning Middle Ages, medieval times, everybody used whole sign house systems. Some people will say Vidius Valens, and some people will say, what about Shripati Bhavachalit? Isn't that quite old? It's not that old. Vidius Valens also is not that old. They used a system of dynamic houses, but not for houses. They used it to calculate things like Shadbala, Bhavabala. They would use Bhavachalit for calculating Shadbala. Vidius Valens, and the Western tradition was also doing the same thing. They had dynamic systems, which I'll explain what a dynamic system is. They had dynamic systems, but they didn't use them as the 12 places of the sky. They used them to figure out how strong a planet is. So everybody used whole sign systems until quite recently, until the second incarnation of astrology in the West. See, in the West, astrology had its initial flourishing period in the Hellenistic era. Then it was stamped out by the Christian church. Then it was brought back, I think mostly by the Persians. And then it was stamped out again by the scientific revolution. And then it was brought back in modern times, like very recent centuries. Okay, so yeah, it was after that first reincarnation from the Persians that the dynamic systems began to flourish and be used as houses. So I would say, my suggestion to you is to use whole sign houses. It's the best house system because it's the original house system. Just like tropical is the original concept of the signs, the whole sign system is the original concept of houses. But let's talk about what the dynamic systems are. And I want to show you another type of other types of fixed houses too. And let's talk about cusps. So here's some interesting questions, right? Eddie says, since the Earth is a perfect sphere, could different house systems have some legitimacy? I don't understand the question, Eddie. I don't think the Earth is a perfect sphere. It's kind of obloid, and I don't see what bearing that has on it. Ravi, if the system is this logical, then why do we have the 17 others? Because people start trying to do new things. Look at YouTube, man. Look at the Navamsha Nakshatras. People just try to start doing new things because the old stuff isn't working. So instead of trying to figure out what mistakes they're making with the old stuff, they try to invent new stuff because everybody's so forward thinking and modern. So people come up with new ideas. And especially if you think about the history of astrology in the West, this didn't happen in India where it wasn't stamped out, but in the West, the astrological culture was practically devastated by the Catholic Church, and then it was restored. When you restore something, it's like a broken leg. It doesn't grow back the same exact strength. And then it gets translated into a new language. Different things happen. Okay? All right, let's see. Oh, I see. My daughter is here terrorizing us. Okay, so let's see what else we got on our plate. Yeah, I want to show you other fixed signs, other fixed systems, other fixed house systems. So let's swap over to here. This one is called the equal system. So you see how it's different from the whole sign system? This is what the whole sign system looks like. Every house is exactly 30 degrees, and every house is exactly the same as the sign. Mommy's home, by the way, if you want to go out. And then this is a equal house system. The thing that it has in common with the whole sign system is every house is 30 degrees. But the thing it doesn't have in common with the whole sign system is that it's not exactly lined up with the signs, is it? So if you see this one, remember, here we know that the ascendant is 10 degrees of Cancer. So look at where they'll put the first house border in this equal house system. They'll put it at 10 degrees of Cancer. Now this is also interesting, particularly interesting, because here's an additional point of discussion or debate. You see, you think that the tropical sidereal debate is big, but there's way more debate in the house systems. Now we have the issue of a cusp. Somebody had asked about cusps earlier. The word cusp means an important point, a point around which some other thing hangs or is determined. If you study historically the books written about astrology, you'll see that the concept of the cusp was some point within the house. But after the revival of astrology, it started to be thought of as the border of a house. So these days, when you hear about a cusp, it will be the border of the house. But originally, when astrologers talked about a cusp, they meant some defining point of the house, which wasn't the border of it. It was some defining point. So this thing that I'm showing you on the screen now is an equal house system chart. But additionally, it's an equal house system with the cusp defined as the border of the house. I would say that this one is not as good as an equal house system where the cusp should be the ascendant degree. So another version of equal house system is you make this 10 degree marker, 10 degree Cancer here should be the middle of the first house. And 15 degrees up from it, 15 degrees down from it should be the borders of the first house, and then you assemble the borders according to that. So do you see the difference between having the cusp be the border of a house or be the midpoint of the house or some other point in the house? Interestingly, I just learned today that Ptolemy had this other weird system where he said it's not 15 degrees north of the ascendant, it's 5 degrees north. He must have had some reason why. But he said start at 5 degrees higher than the ascendant. But so you can see there's a lot of different opinions once you get into later astrology. Ptolemy is quite early, but he's talking about some house systems, usually not as house systems, but as how you would calculate Shadbala, the planet's placement. It's like a Digbala thing or a Bhavabala. Did I lose you, or do you have any questions about the cusps and what difference it makes if the cusp is the border or the middle? So the cusp. Raphael, so we're going to talk about what to use Bhava Chalit for. Raphael wants to know if we should look at a Bhava Chalit chart at all, or if I would. You would look at a Bhava Chalit for calculating stuff about the Shadbala, the planet's strength, but don't use it interpretively. I wouldn't. You're free to if you want to, but I like my system to be simple and clean and work. And if it's not working, I want something to fix it, not add new stuff on top of it. So Eddie, you see, Eddie says houses are in relation to the actual ground, right? So if the Earth is oblong, some eastern horizon points are going to shift faster than others because we're like an oval spinning. So Eddie, that's right. That's the dynamic. That's part of the dynamic system. I think there's two dynamic systems. One is space-based and one is time-based. So I think one of them is taking that into account. But as I said, the original concept of the houses is how do the signs relate to the eastern point, which for your local eastern point is the ascendant. Right? Get it? So it doesn't matter. All this other stuff doesn't matter. Later on, they start to think about fancy stuff. Like, well, we're not exactly round, or, well, the time is not exactly equal. I'll explain what these other things are. But so far, I want to know if you're clear. Yeah, you're clear? All right. Okay, so now you know about 3 house systems, actually. You know about the whole sign house system, the original system. You know about a fixed sign house system with the cusp defined as the border. And you know about a fixed sign system with a fixed house system with the cusp defined as the midpoint. You also know that you could define the cusp as some other way. Maybe like 5 degrees north of the cusp is the beginning of the house. There's a lot of options once you depart from the idea of whole sign houses. You got a lot of options. Your field is open. So basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to say, well, the symbolism of the house is because of the sun's position in that part of the sky. That's where the symbolism derives from. Like somebody earlier asked about the 12th and the 2nd. So the 12th house is where the sun is up in the sky after it rises up over the eastern horizon. It's up in the sky, but its angle is so low that it blinds you. And so that's why the 12th house represents invisible things you can't see. It has a uncomfortable feeling to it because the sun's angle is really strong and it's getting into your eye and preventing you from seeing the sky. Whereas the 2nd house, it's below the eastern horizon. It's like the bedrock. So it represents stability and things like that. So the astrologers, as they're trying to improve their systems, they're thinking, well, the very symbolism of the house is based on the sun's position. So let's make it more accurate to where the sun's actual position is, because if somebody's born at 1 degree of Cancer, then there's going to be 30 degrees of bedrock as their first house. But all that bedrock is supposed to represent stability. You see? You get the point? So that's what made them want to start experimenting with different styles. So they wanted to make it less idealized and more exact. But actually astrology is quite idealized. It's a symbolic system on the idealization of nature. Even the fact that we have 12 signs and not 12.24 is idealized. Okay. So let's check out the next house system. Let's start to look at dynamic systems. The dynamic system, this is the most popular one today. Let's look at this one first, Porphyry. This is one of the first ones. When Indian astrologers speak of the Shripati system, it's exactly the same as this system, Porphyry. So this is one of the first dynamic house systems that was defined or has survived that we still have record of. So now you can see this very same chart. Look at these houses, because what's going on here? I mean, 12, 11, and 10 are gigantic houses. 4, 5, and 6 are huge. 1, 2, 3, 9, 8, 7 are tiny. How did that happen? So the way that it happens is, let's go back and look at this simpler one, right? You see this AS, that's your ascendant, and you see this MC. The MC is the midhaven, right? So what the midhaven becomes very important in defining the dynamic house systems. It's as important as the ascendant. In a whole sign system, you will hear mention of the midhaven in the classic Sanskrit texts and the classic Greek and whatever else. I think they're all in Greek. In the classic Greek texts in Hellenistic astrology, you'll hear mention of it. But as a point, as an important point. For example, in this chart, you could say, well, the midhaven is in the 8th house. That's interesting. The career has some connect. Midhaven is like a 10th house point. It's the point. So what is it? What is the midhaven? Why is it called the midhaven? Haven is the sky, and mid means the middle point. So it's like, what is the middle? What is the true middle point of the sky? Normally you think you just look up, and that's the midpoint. And if you're on the equator, that's always the truth. But as you get north or south of the equator, and the year changes from June 21st to September 21st, or no, from June 21st to September 21st to December 21st to March 21st, as the sun goes through its 4 points, that midhaven drifts north and south. Because what is it? Midhaven is the highest point to which the sun or the planets will get to at your location. So if you live way up in like Umeå, Sweden, I forgot how to say it, like really north, like this is Stockholm, Sweden. This is pretty far north. So, this is August in Stockholm. So the sun is always really high. And it's midhaven is like all the way west in this chart. So the midhaven changes. Like if you're born in the summer, it's different than if you were born at the same place in the winter. If you're born more north, it's different than if you were born more towards the equator, because it's about at your place, what's the highest point that the ecliptic reaches. Is that clear? Did I explain what the midhaven is? Clearly, you have any questions about what a midhaven is? Or you just don't understand? You want me to try it again? Fernanda Melo says, does the midhaven exist in Vedic astrology? Yes. You can even hear talk about saying that the nakshatra of the midhaven is significant. And just like Shripati system exists in Vedic. So Shripati is going to be based on the angle between the midhaven and the ascendant. So certainly they're talking about, they're aware of the midhaven, they're tracking it. You can use the midhaven. I use the midhaven. I like the midhaven. I think it's a significant point. I use the whole sign house system, and I keep track of where the midhaven is. It's another important point. It's like, it's the highest point, so it's important. All right. So you clear what the midhaven is. The highest point that the ecliptic will get to, depending on your latitude and the time of year. So now we got an example of a chart that's in Sweden in the summer. So it's not going to be it's going to be very abnormal. Let's look at it again. Periphery. So you see this line over here. That's the border between the 9th and the 10th house. What is that? That's like something like 23 degrees Aquarius. Let's go back and look at the whole sign. See where the midhaven is? It's 23 degrees Aquarius. So the midhaven is going to define the cusp of the 10th house in these dynamic systems, and the ascendant is going to define the cusp of the 1st house. So if you look, you see the ascendant is 10 degrees Cancer, so the first house begins at 10 degrees Cancer. The midheaven is 23 degrees Aquarius, so the 10th house begins at 23 degrees Aquarius. And this system is very simple. This is the first system. So they just say, just divide those quadrants. Now you get quadrants, right? You see these four thicker lines from the midheaven to the IC, from the AC to the DC, from the ascendant to the descendant, from the medium coli to the imum coli. That defines four quadrants, and then periphery says just divide those quadrants equally. So these are equal divisions of the three quadrants, but the quadrants themselves shift. Right? So this is the basic dynamic house system, the basic movable house system, flexible house system. And so sometimes you get very, very tiny houses, and sometimes you get very, very big houses. And look, you got, look at this. You got Leo is in 1, 2, 3 houses. Leo is in the second house, third house, and fourth house. To a person who uses whole sign system all the time, this looks so funny. Like, wow, what the heck is going on here? Leo is in 3 houses because we define Leo as the second house. So the sun is going to wind up being the ruler of what would be the third and the fourth house, because the cusps of the third and the fourth house fall in Leo. So you're going to start wandering off really far from the way that the original sages did the astrology. But there is this system, and the original intention of the system was to calculate the balas of the planets, the strengths of the planets. The north node, Nina has a question. Is the north node the midheaven? No, the north node is a planet. It moves. Like here, unfortunately, the north node is not in this shot, and they have other planets, weird planets. But the north node is where the sun's path intersects the moon's path as the moon heads north. So that's Rahu. So that thing is a point in the sky that moves with the sun and the moon. The midheaven is where the ecliptic meets the prime meridian. In other words, the highest point of the ecliptic at your location in the sky. The north node is a point out there in space, middle space, where the planets and the sun are. The midheaven is here in local space in your Earth's sky, where the ecliptic intersects with your local most northern point, your meridian. Okay. Which is the better system? Basically, the whole sign system is the original house system. If you really want to make your astrology cleaner, simpler, easier to use, and easier to fix and improve, and easier to get good at, just use a whole sign house system. If you want to be able to read the classic astrological sages and use their techniques effectively, use the system they use, which is a whole sign house system. If you're totally just into doing things the modern way, then you'll be using a Placidius system. But if you want to go back to the way it was originally conceived and benefit from the genius and divinity of the original conceivers, then use a whole sign system. Another way to answer the question of which house system is better is the dynamic house systems are better for calculating the planet's bala. And that was their original intention. Bala means strength, potency. And the whole sign system is better for doing your interpretive work. This is the first area of the sky, it has this symbolism. This is the second area of the sky, it has that symbolism. And it's better for establishing the lords and all that stuff. All right. Fernanda asks, Midheaven Vedic equals Midheaven Tropical. So Fernanda, you've done this very big faux pas, which I do not tolerate. It's to equate Vedic with Sidereal. So what you really wanted to say is the Sidereal Midheaven the same as the Tropical Midheaven? It's not going to be described as the same degree. but there's going to be the same angle between the midheaven and the ascendant, regardless of whether you're talking about it sidereally or tropically. But if you're describing the position sidereally, you're going to have a different nomenclature for it than if it's tropical, although it's the same point. If that's very, very confusing, go and watch the recording of last week's Q&A, because I explain how that works. Arvind asks, we understand that the ascendant is the cusp of the first house, but where would the first house degree start? What time did I start this live session? It's only been going for 20 minutes? No, it's been going for 40 minutes, right? Did I start early? Sorry if I started earlier than I'm supposed to. Ascendant is the cusp of the first house. I did. I started too early, didn't I? I'm really sorry, guys. I started a half hour early. We understand that the ascendant is the cusp of the first house, but where would the first house degree start, right? So that's what I was talking about. There's different theories about it. If you have a whole sign system, then the definition is because this cusp falls in Cancer, then Cancer is the first house. If you have an equal sign system, then the definition will be the ascendant is at 10 degrees of Cancer, so the first house starts at Cancer. Or if you have a midpoint whole sign system, whole house system, equal house system, if you have a midpoint equal house system, then you would have the ascendant defined 15 the middle of the first house. So it would be 25 degrees Gemini would be the start of the first house, and 25 degrees Cancer would be the end of the first house. And if you have the periphery system, then because the ascendant is the cusp of the first house begins there. Or you could, why not, invent a new system where you could say, no, that'll be the midpoint, or that'll be some other point in the first house. Once you get away from the whole sign system, there's variables that you can tinker with. And they do, and that's why there's a dozen systems or more of different houses. Just change this variable and see what happens. Gosh, I started a half hour early. All right. Let's look at the next one. Oh, let me see. With the whole house system, do you define the ascendant in the middle or the start of the first house? So it depends on the system. There's one system which defines the ascendant as the middle of the first house. There's another system which defines the ascendant as the start of the first house. The start of the first house is more popular. Can the ascendant be in two signs? No. Of course not. The ascendant is a point. The ascendant is a point. Do I specifically? Well, I don't use fixed houses. I use whole sign systems. If I were to use a fixed system, I would put the ascendant in the middle of the fixed house. Okay. So again, with the Vedic calculations and Western calculations, which ascendant to follow, I'm not sure. Ash, the ascendant is just a point. You're not sure about what house system to choose. So I'm showing you that there's many different opinions about the house system, just like there's a couple of different opinions about the zodiac. Right? So you're going to have to find somebody who can research reliably and trust that person. Not entirely trust just because you trust, but you can see with your own intelligence that this person knows what they're talking about a lot. Or you can do the research yourself and figure it out. You just have to study the history of astrology and how these things have developed and how they were originally defined. So if you study the original definition of, the zodiac, that was last week. If you find the original definition of the zodiac is based on equinoxes, and you can study the history of how it developed and how they changed it to be based on stars, then you can say, okay, well, if I want to go with the tradition and stick with the way that they changed it to be based on stars, I'll use a sidereal zodiac. And I can listen more easily to the modern people explaining what astrology is about then in my Indian culture, because they're all talking about sidereal stuff. Or if I want to go back to do it the way the ancients did it, then I'm going to use this tropical system. And I can benefit more from how the ancients were describing things, because that's the system they used. So if you got the zodiac question right now, then you're going to want to, after we're done, go to my channel page and go to last week's Q&A. We discussed the two zodiacs at length last week. You may, the thing is complicated. If you change your zodiacs from sidereal to tropical, you may switch your planet to another house. You may not. It depends on a whole bunch of factors. It depends upon the degree of your ascendant and the degree of those planets. It depends upon which house system you use. If you this is an interesting point that I wanted to make. So one of my slogans or mottos or mantras for the tropical zodiac and Vedic astrology is, let's liberate the signs from the stars, or let's liberate the nakshatras from the signs, really is what I'm more into, right? So that's a similar thing that these astrologers have done with the dynamic system. They want to liberate the houses from the signs and fix them to the earthly points. It makes sense, because that's why they did it, because it makes sense. Well, these houses are based on, that's the east, that's up, that's the west, so the sun sets over there, so it has that symbolism. The sun rises over there, so it has that symbolism. So let's fix it to those points. So that's a fixed system. It is liberated. Like, look, here, in this whole sign house system, the houses are bound to the signs. But in here, in a fixed system, the houses are freed from the signs. The houses and the signs are different. And in here, they're even more free. In a dynamic house system, they're even more free. So if you're using a dynamic system, like especially like this one, then it doesn't matter. You can change your zodiac, your planets will not change houses. So it's complicated. So it's like brain surgery. My uncle had a book on his shelf when I was a kid called Brain Surgery Self-Taught. And 90% of the time while I do these live YouTube things, or post things on Facebook or whatever, I'm thinking, actually, what am I doing is just encouraging people to do self-taught brain surgery. But it's fun, and you actually learn a little bit about brain surgery eventually. But really, astrology is meant to be done by experts. I'm not even an expert that was intended to be. But at least you got to study a lot, practice a lot, really understand the system. You have to really understand it. Hobbyists or people that aren't cut out for it are not really going to understand it. But still, it's useful to listen to astrologers discuss it, because at least you can figure out which person really understands it, and then you can just kind of follow them or take help from them. I know that doesn't sound very modern or anything, that everybody should think for themselves and do their own thing, but that's just the way it works. Hey. All right, let me show you this other house system. This is the most popular one today. So periphery or Shripati is quite old. That's this. Then there's this one, which you'll notice is not exactly the same. Can you tell the difference between the two? This is a periphery, and this is a Placidius. Periphery, Placidius. You can see that there's a slight difference. Do you know? Would you be able to say what it is? Let me see if anybody can put it in the comments. Periphery, Placidius. Midhaven doesn't change. Look. See, the Midhaven is this dark line right here defining the cusp, the start point of the 10th house. Does that change? Keep your eye on it. It's 23 degrees Aquarius. It doesn't move. The Midhaven is the same. All the house systems are going to be based on the ascendant and the midhaven. The whole sign house system is solely based on the ascendant. And the fixed house systems are solely based on the ascendant. The dynamic house systems are based on the ascendant and the midhaven. And they're going to dissect the space in between the ascendant and the midhaven in different ways. That's what makes the different systems. 10th cusp is the midhaven. You're not off the hook. So you see the difference? You don't see it? Nobody sees it? It's not equal. Roxanne, you got it. So periphery just says, all right, you got this many degrees. What does it look like? 140 degrees between the ascendant and the midhaven. So, okay, 140 divided by 3. Gosh, my math is terrible. Is whatever number it is. And so you just divide it by 3. And then you get the 3 equal sign houses within that division. But this one over here has got something more complicated going on because they're not all the same size. So this is doing something called trisect. And if I can't even divide 140 by 3, I can't really explain to you what a trisection is. But it's some other kind of math where you trisect the thing, whatever that means. So this is some other more complicated math. And then there's other systems of math. Basically, the difference between all the different dynamic systems is the way that they want to divide up the space. And then there's a whole another set of house systems which call themselves space-based, which are not really localized. That's a whole other can of worms. Once you get off track, you just keep going off track. It's like Swati Nakshatra, just keeps going. So right. Good job. Okay, guys. So any questions? So you can see, all right. I thought that I had to choose between tropical and sidereal, but look, now I have different house systems. Let's say if this was your chart, you would say, all right, I have Jupiter and Venus and the Sun and Mercury in my second house. Wow, let me interpret that. Then some other dude comes along and says, no, you don't. Look, you have Jupiter and Venus in your first house, and you have the Sun and Mercury in your second house. And you go, huh? That's a whole different chart than what I grew up with. And then some other guy comes along and says, no, you don't. You got Jupiter and Venus in your second house like you thought, but in your third house is the Sun, and Mercury's in your fourth house, my friend. And you're like, oh man, which one is right? And then some other guy comes along and says, it's not exactly like that. You got Venus in your second house, but it's Jupiter is actually in your third house, and the Sun is in your third house too, and Mercury is in your fourth house. So go ahead and interpret that. So you're just going to throw your hands up in the air and say, what the hell? I don't know what to do. So that's why you either just know nothing and you just accept whatever somebody tells you, or you have to know everything and figure it out yourself. So the way that I figured it out after my, I don't know how many years I've been studying, close to 10. So the way that I figured it out is the original house system is this one. This is the original conception of the houses. It's the whole sign house system. This is the best one to use. These other house systems, beginning with the fixed system and going down to the crazy dynamic systems, were initially meant to calculate not the interpretive chart, but the planet's bala, which is also there in Western astrology. So use this system. Use the whole sign system. And in the same way, you can look at the last week's video to see what kind of sense I made out of tropical and sidereal. Let's see what other random questions you got. We got a couple more minutes. What we got? 6 more minutes? So how was that? Did you break your head? Did you flex your head a little bit? Show me some comments. Let's see what you got. It's annoying, really annoying. John, but it's annoying to the lay person that there should be so many options. But don't be annoyed by it. That's life. There's not just one opinion about things, right? And you have to figure out for yourself which one you trust. And to me, I trust the one that's the original concept. And that the houses are abstractions of the points on the sky. So that's why I want to use tropical and whole signs, because those are the original concepts. They may have developed and changed differently later as astrology developed and changed. But I like to use the original system. You guys, I want to see questions about houses. I'm going to hold you to that. You got any questions about houses? Software that Tara wants to know if there's software that uses whole house Kala. And I think any software will let you choose a tropical zodiac and a whole sign house system. I don't think there's any software that doesn't. Maybe some really basic like web interface won't let you. The only trick that makes it difficult with software is you need to be able to do sidereal lunar mansions or sidereal nakshatras while having tropical rashis. That limits your choices to Kala. Jehora doesn't what? Jehora doesn't have... See, the problem with Vedic astrology systems, you notice all those examples I showed you were on a wheel, right? They don't use like the square charts because it's very difficult to see it on a square chart. Square charts are made for the whole sign house system. So a lot of the Vedic astrology softwares will calculate Bhava Chalits, but they'll still show it to you with a chart system that's based on a whole sign, so it's not very useful. So if you do want to play with or experiment or use the dynamic house systems, I recommend that you get a universal software like a Solar Fire or something. Okay, other questions? Good, John. I hear you're relaxed. Darren wants to know why did Placidius become so popular? It's just because it's modern. So you see, like imagine if punk rock starts off and there's a band that's super important, the Bad Brains. And everybody knows about that band, the Bad Brains. Everybody's all into them. And then punk rock dies out. And then 10 years later, it restarts again in a kind of new form like new metal or something. Then everybody's going to get into Linkin Park and some new band. But the people of Linkin Park were listening to Bad Brains and with their own mindset, and they made their music based on that. But the people that listen to Linkin Park have no idea about that. They just know about Linkin Park. So that's what happens with all kinds of ideas. When things go out, have a period where they're gone and then come back again, you're going to get that dynamic. So with astrology, what you had was, in the West, this is what the beauty of Indian astrology systems are. It didn't happen like this in India. It stayed consistent, flourished. So there isn't this, you'll see, when you go to Indian astrologers, they are all going to use a whole sign house system. They may throw the concept of Bhava Chalit out there just to kind of show you that they know a lot of stuff, but they don't really use it that much. But in the West, what happened was, I think it was like around the 2nd century, I guess, something around that time when the Catholic Church started to form and become very powerful, they stamped out the astrologers. And then later on, it got rebuilt. As it got rebuilt, a new idea happened, and all those people picked up on it. And then why is Windows so popular? Just because that's how things happen. Just because something is popular doesn't mean that it's the best. Linux is a much better system than Windows, but it's not the most popular. What else have we got? Jehor does let you use sidereal nakshatra and tropical zodiac, as Millie pointed out. However, I don't think they have a really good system for doing dynamic house systems. If you really want to understand dynamic house systems, you need to look at it like this. You need to be able to have separate borders for the houses and the signs. But most of Vedic astrology software just shows you signs and then tells you what house that sign is. So even when the Vedic astrology software calculates Bhava Chalit, it doesn't really display it for you in a intuitive way, useful way. So I recommend if you want to do these dynamic house systems just get solar fire. It's just the simplest Western astrology software. Or some Western astrology wheel software. What else we got? All right. All right, guys. Jason, it's not like the Westerners always want something shiny and new and the Indians don't. Look at how the Indians flock to all these new ideas that people put up on YouTube. It's just that in the West, there was a cultural thing that happened that didn't happen in India. In India, the religion embraced the astrology, and because it's actually a part of the religion to use astrology to calculate the ceremonies. But in the West, the religion wanted to centralize everything into a church. So they wanted to conquer other people. So they started to stamp out other ideas. So it's just that the way it went in the West was you had one religion trying to dominate all the others, so it erased other ways of thinking about life. Well, that didn't happen in India. But it's not really that Westerners want new stuff more than Indian people do. All right, guys, I think I'm going to split. But here's an interesting question. Floating Wisdom says, would you consider the Lugna, which is the ascendant? Oh, yeah, I do need to split. I need to have an appointment. The Earth sign? Yeah, right? People sometimes say, this is an interesting thing. People sometimes say, we'll end with this. Why is there no Earth in astrology? Where's the Earth in astrology? Well, that's what the houses are. The houses are the Earth. The houses are the segments of the Earth's sky. Okay, I'll leave you with that. Great. I hope this clarified. Next week, what am I going to do? I forgot. I'll do something interesting for next week. Around Wednesday or so, check back. I'll give an announcement about it. And this next week is also the Astrology Summit from Astrology Hub, so check into that. Right, that's a good point, Raphael. If you want to play with the dynamic house systems but don't want to buy software, he said Astrodynast website is free and you could use the chart creator there. All right, guys, see you around. Love you.